Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I'm delighted to be joined today by Purdeep Sangha. We will be discussing the neuroscience of business performance. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Purdeep, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Oh, sure. So my name is Purdeep Sangha. I am a husband. I'm a father of two young kids. I live in Canada, just outside of Toronto. I'm actually just across the border, about 20 minutes away from Niagara Falls. And I'm an entrepreneur. I have a number of different businesses in different sectors. I love business, absolutely enjoy, and that's part of my mission is to help other business owners be successful. One of the businesses that we have is an advisory firm where we work specifically CEOs, executives, and business owners. But long story short, my mission in life is really to help people be more successful in business and life because they are very much intertwined. And we talked about that work-life balance, and that can be a challenging balance for a lot of people.
Well, we can get to work-life balance, but for right now, the topic is neuroscience and business performance. What is neuroscience?
Well, neuroscience is basically, you can just say how your brain and your nervous system performs. Essentially, it's how you operate as a human being. And the technical aspect of that is becoming more and more, you can say, mysterious, but also uncovered as science digs into it. We have more tools to take a look at that. But essentially, when people think of neuroscience, they think of the brain, right? They think of the brain and how the brain operates and all the amazing things that the brain can do. And a lot of the magical things that can happen when you actually learn how your brain operates.
So that brings us to business performance. Now, obviously, all performance is dependent on the brain. If your brain isn't functioning, you're not performing. So what is it that you are trying to teach your clients when it comes to the neuroscience and business performance?
Well, essentially what we noticed was, and we've been studying neuroscience, and me personally, for over 2 decades. So it was before neuroscience became big. We were taking a look at that, using that in our performance. But long story short, when we were working with CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs, early on, we noticed that we could give them a great strategy. We could give them a brilliant business strategy. And a lot of times they wouldn't execute effectively, or their teams wouldn't execute effectively. And then when we dug in a lot deeper, we noticed that they needed help more on the individual performance side. And so when we took a look even further, then we noticed that, okay, they were getting technical training, they're getting all these, you can say, emotional intelligence training, but they weren't getting training on terms of how their biology operated. And I'll give you an example. There's certain times during the day, we call it the ultradian rhythm, that you have better performance than other times. It's similar to the circadian rhythm. And I think a lot of us know that our brain is programmed, our body is programmed to want to go to sleep when the sun goes down and when it gets darker, and wants to wake up when we see the sun rise. But we also have these 90-minute cycles throughout the day where we actually have better performance at a certain period, and then it actually comes down. And what we end up doing is trying to ride through that regardless and work 8 hours or 10 hours. And some of us don't even take breaks, for example, but that's actually working against your biology. It's working against your neurochemistry and your neuroscience. So what we've done is really taken a look, because these studies have been available in the sports world, right? A majority of the neuroscience studies that happen are typically in the sports world because people get tons of money on sports teams and they want their players to perform at their best. It's trickled into the business performance side, but not as much. So our goal is to really bring that science into the business performance side.
Now, if you're using sports as the analogy, you have players who all of a sudden are performing phenomenally. And the expression is they're in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about?
The zone is actually one element of it. We call it the complete zone, and we've done a lot of research around that. So that is one aspect of it. Yes. How do you perform when you're in that state? And I think a lot of people have experienced that when you're just into this zone where time is just flying by, things are almost effortless. You're really engaged in it, and you're actually doing things that you never thought you could do. So that, yes, is one aspect that we teach people how to be in the zone more often so they can actually be more productive.
Now, I was reading a book probably about 2 years ago on neuroscience. And at that time, I was very much interested in how the brain can create new neural pathways. So if someone has been paralyzed, the brain is taught to move a limb. And it's done by the creation of new neural pathways in the brain. And there was a very good video I saw on YouTube. I forget the person's name, but she explained that it's not true that your brain cells die out as you get older. You still have plenty of brain cells, and no matter what age you are, you can get them functioning. And long story short, I had at the same time an interesting dilemma. I, as some viewers know, suffer from Graves' disease, which is when your thyroid goes wacky, to use a medical term. And the side effect that I will have forever is double vision. So once the thyroid calmed down, I was able to get new glasses. I have 3 pairs of glasses, one for the computer, one for reading, one for distance. And they all have in them a prism. Now you can look at the lenses as much as you want and you're not going to see the prism. But I know it's there because when I look at you right now, I don't see 2 of you. People don't look like a Picasso drawing. But when I got the glasses for the first time, the optometrist, for no apparent reason other than the fact that they were closest, handed me the reading glasses and the card that we all have seen with writing on it, different fonts to check to make sure I could read. And I could read fine. The double vision was gone. Then she handed me the distance glasses and they weren't working. And I was, to say the least, disappointed and a little bit angry because I was fed up with the double vision. And she told me to give it a day. So I went home and I said to myself, this is weird. If they were going to mess up both glasses, yeah, but to get one correct and the other not, didn't make any sense. So I did an experiment. I went to my front door. Afterwards, I thought it was surprising that my neighbors didn't call the cops. And I would take my glasses off and I would see one car, but I would see it twice, like this and then on top. And then I put the glasses on just for a second and I took them off. And when I put them on just for a second, the double vision went away. And then after a few seconds, it came back. So I stood at the door for about 3 minutes doing this. And then I stopped and I went back and did whatever work I was doing because there was no problem with the computer. And for about 2 hours, I did the taking off and putting on of the glasses, and the double vision disappeared. So my thinking is, and she confirmed it, that I created a neural pathway by creating a habit. So habit forming means creating new neural pathways. How do you get your clients to create positive habits that will get their brain working the way you want it to and they want it to?
Mhm. Yeah, there's two things with that. Well, actually, three things. First of all, they actually have to do it, and they have to start out small. Right, and just like anything else, it's action that actually creates that pathway. And
Mhm.
by actually acting, you actually get there. The second thing is motivation and drive, what I call inspiration. That's the first element. Your brain is a goal-driven organ. And if it doesn't have a goal, then it'll find a goal. And that goal is typically not something that you want. It could be something that media wants you to think about or other things. But you have to put that goal in front of you. So similar to what you did,
Mhm.
is you had that goal. You wanted to
Yeah.
remove.
You bet I had that goal.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get rid of the double vision. So having that motivation is a huge driver for the brain, because what ends up happening is once you have motivation, then your brain actually produces dopamine. And that dopamine is a main, you can say, neuromodulator for motivation and drive. And it actually wakes up your brain. It actually produces adrenaline as well. So now your brain is alert, is more open to actually doing things and creating new pathways. So that's why goals and inspiration and motivation are critical. Doing the steps is critical, but then also rewarding yourself. And that is just as critical, because having those small wins tells your brain, it gives you, again, if you say, great, I did that, you're creating another dopamine, you can say, connection, where you're telling your brain, what I did was good. I want to do it again. So those are you can say the three specific ways, or the three elements that you need to include in building a new routine, so that it becomes, you can say, even second nature, where you create a new pathway. So conditioning is all about creating new pathways, is all about repetition. It's called long-term potentiation, which means basically it's that old saying, you know what, nerves that fire together wire together. That's the old neuroscience, you can say, saying. But essentially, the more you do something, the stronger that connection gets. And so if you want to get that habit even ingrained even more, then keep doing it. The more you do it, the more ingrained.
Now, if you're working with a solopreneur, then you only have to worry about his brain or her brain. But how does this translate when you've got a team? And then team dynamics comes into it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I'm never dealing with one brain. Because the support environment, the interaction that the individual has with everybody else around them, has a significant impact on how they behave. So that is the first thing that we take a look at. It is, what is the social circle of that individual? Is it going to support the new habit or the new goal, or is it going to take away from that? Because we know that social influence is one of the strongest factors for people either changing their behavior, not changing the behavior, goals, motivation, whatever it is. Our brains are actually designed to connect. We pick up on other people's emotions unconsciously and consciously, but our brain is constantly trying to read other people. So that question is very important. How does it impact? It has a significant impact, because that team, eventually, when we talk about the zone, teams can become in the zone as well. People can almost read each other and predict each other's behavior once they get to know each other, their strengths and even their weaknesses, to start to blend. And that's where things like, or training, for example, such as the Navy SEALs, that's why they're so good at what they do, is because they're able to blend and almost become one single, you can say, entity, even though there might be 6 or a dozen people on that team.
But as opposed to the SEALs, you can have a team where there is one person who just doesn't get it. And it may be intentional, it may be unintentional. They may be trying as best as they can, but it's not going to happen. But they do have something to contribute to the team, yet the negative can be overpowering. So how do you deal with somebody like that?
Well, I think there's different ways of dealing with someone like that, because it depends on what you're looking for. So maybe they need a different role within the team. For example, maybe they need to up their skills. But if you're saying that you've tried as a leader and as the individual, you've tried everything you could, and that person's still behaving that way, then what you need to do is mitigate. And meaning, bring that person in when you need their specific skill set or expertise or knowledge, and then isolate outside of that. And I'm not saying put them in a cage and say, see you later in the corner of an office somewhere. What I'm saying is be intentional when it comes to the interactions that the rest of the team has with this individual. If the opportunity comes where you can replace this individual's skill set or the individual, and it's a better fit for the team and they're performing even higher, and if that's part of your culture, right, to be a high performing team and you want a high performing business, then I always recommend taking into consideration possibly replacing that person.
When you are making this presentation or a presentation to a potential client, and you start talking about neuroscience, that can be intimidating. So how do you approach the subject in such a way that they don't think that you're, on the one hand, a snake oil salesman, or that it's going to be too complicated and they just, there are other consultants who'll come in and talk about team building and setting goals, and it's done in such a way, and without any scientific lingo or jargon.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah. So when we have initial conversations, we don't talk about the science aspect at all until we get into further conversations. So the first question, we really get into the psychology of the individual. So when we do presentations, it's really about changing people's behavior. There's two things ultimately, as an advisor, what you're responsible for: changing attitudes and changing behavior, right? And that's ultimately it. And so what we talk about is how to do that. And when people get curious, or maybe there's a point that we say something and they're intrigued by it, then we will talk about the science. The science comes in subsequent conversations. And here's where the science is powerful. Because if I ask someone to change their behavior just by saying, hey, look, this is what you need to do, a lot of people are skeptical. They'll be like, okay, well, that's great. But if I show them, hey, look, there's been research done, our team's done research, and we've worked with 200 individuals on this specific thing. And there's also brain scans to show this, that when you do this, this is what happens to your brain, and this is how you can actually perform better. People are a lot more open to it, especially guys, because they like to have proof. They like to have some kind of factual thing behind it before they actually change their behavior. So we use that as more of a backup, not necessarily on the front end, because you're absolutely right. You can confuse someone by too much jargon. And our job is to make it simple so people can actually execute.
You mentioned at the start, almost just as an aside, work-life balance. Now, your personal life can mess up what you've got to do at work. So I'm a big believer in complete, total separation, a nice high wall between your personal life and your work life, except in the case of, God forbid, death or illness. You keep your personal life out of the workplace. But you're going to come in, and that really means talking about it. The emotions you can't keep because the emotions are inside of you. So if you're working with the office team, the business team, and everything is fine, how do you protect them or teach them to compartmentalize their personal emotions in order to continue to achieve the business goals, the performance level that you're looking for?
Well, here's my thought on that. And based on our research, we know that there is no line between personal and business, because majority of our thinking is at the unconscious level. So although consciously we think we're getting rid of a feeling or a thought, it's unconsciously there.
Right.
And we take a look at our day, 47% on average is based on what they call automaticity or autopilot. And when you're in your autopilot, guess what happens? You go into that unconscious mode, right? And that's where you bring up all the personal things or the dreams that you had the night before and you don't remember, but it gives you this weird feeling. All of these things, or the fight that you had the night before, right? All of these things are at the unconscious level. So what we do is we teach people this. We teach them how their unconscious has an influence on their conscious. So it's awareness is very important for people to understand, because yes, you could be a high performer at work and try to categorize or say, hey, this isn't going to bother me. But at some point in time, it builds up. If you don't address the things at work or at home, eventually it does impact your performance in the business.
Now, there are those people who say that meditation, I finally got it right. Usually when I say meditation, I say mediation. Meditation helps to focus the mind. What do you believe helps to focus the mind?
Oh, I absolutely am 110% behind meditation and mindfulness practices myself. I've been doing them for 30 plus years. There's a lot
With
of
a name like yours, I kind of thought it.
Yeah, and you know, this is really interesting because it wasn't mainstream back then. This is stuff that I used to do before it was even really talked about, and I saw the power of it. Right, when I talk about neuroscience, when I talk about mindfulness and meditation, these are things that I was able to implement that I saw that I just came across in life. For example, how to have a photographic memory, how to learn things faster, all of these things, how to have creative, you can say people call it creative genius. I was top student throughout my university years and through my high school years, not because I was special, but because I was able to utilize these tools that have now been talked about and researched, such as mindfulness and meditation. Meditation is a powerful tool. If you take a look at all of the high stress jobs or occupations, they've done research around this. What they showed, and we're talking about occupations where there's, you know, a high degree of risk as well of losing your life.
Air traffic controllers.
Yeah. Or for example, Navy SEALs that I talked about, the number one thing that helped them with anxiety and stress and all these recovery was meditation and mindfulness practices above anything else. And so what they've shown is that it is a key aspect to not only keeping your brain young, but also regeneration, also focus and attention. And I think this is something that's very important, especially in today's age where we are constantly distracted by technology, social media. We are being trained to lose our attention. And this is where mindfulness and meditation will actually help you bring that back. A lot of people talk about, I come across a lot of people, CEOs, entrepreneurs, executives, a lot of, just in general, where people talk about ADD. And I think there's a lot to be said about ADD or ADHD. And I'm not a professional there, nor do I pretend to be one. I always encourage people to go see a professional. But what I honestly believe as well is that we are trained to have ADD symptoms just because we're so in touch with technology. And what they've shown is that meditation has a significant impact on your ability to focus and pay attention, because that's what meditation mindfulness is all about, is where you put your attention.
We are quickly running out of time. So I want to share with our viewers your contact information. And of course, this is a time where Zoom acts up. And before I let you go, I'll ask you the question I ask all of my guests. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, how would you have responded?
Well, I think the one thing that maybe if you ask me, well, where do emotions come into play in all of this when it comes to performance in neuroscience? I would say it is one of the biggest factors, because although people take a look at neuroscience and they think of the brain, deep down, it's really about how we feel, because how we feel determines our quality of life, but also determines our performance. It's hard to perform at your best if you're feeling crappy. It really is, or if you're feeling down.
What about sleep?
Oh, sleep is so significant when it comes to this. Again, this is the second factor. Actually, it's borderline right there with meditation and recovery. Sleep is the most important thing. If you want to take how to reduce your anxiety, how to reduce stress, how to reduce burnout, how to perform at your better, you have to recover, and sleep is a number one factor for recovery.
And there are those people who say they only need 3 hours of sleep. There are those people who say they need 8 hours of sleep. And there are those people who say that they sleep however long they sleep. And the important thing for them is a 15-minute nap during the day.
Yeah, I think everybody has a different rhythm. What I do know, again, from our research and from our experience, is that if you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, and let's just say you're not napping, you're going to be challenged with your performance. So that's what we see consistently.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Purdeep, thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers do as well.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you having me.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and as always, please stay focused on success.